The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Thursday night football, first place in the NFC East. What more could you ask for?
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
David, for the first time in a long time, the Eagles and Commanders are playing for first place in the NFC East.
Yeah.
Let's just start there. Did you expect that this game, let's go back to when the schedule was made, was going to have this big of an implication come Thursday night?
No, I mean, I think it's hard for anybody to have predicted that, this game would be for first place. And of course, the most rabid Commanders fan would love to stand there and say, like, I knew this was coming and I knew all that. And that's fantastic, right? That's what fans are for. Like, fans are supposed to look at the rookie quarterback and the brand new head coach and the sexy GM and say 14 wins. Like, nobody's going to stop this crew. And I love it. But, being an objective observer, it's hard to look at a team with a new head coach, 60% or a turnover from the active roster from last season, rookie quarterback, offensive coordinator. Obviously, he's new with the new coaching staff, and it's an offensive coordinator that a lot of people just didn't have a lot of expectations for coming back to the National Football League. So it's hard to say that. However, I will say, going back to preseason coverage, that we kind of laid out a blueprint to what could lead the Washington Commanders to contend to win the NFC East division this season. And it led to 10 victories. So we mapped out 7 of them that we felt, the Commanders could pull off. They pulled off a good amount of those so far. And there are a couple that they need to kind of steal. The Ravens could have been one, the Steelers could have been one, and splitting with the Philadelphia Eagles is certainly part of that blueprint. And then getting some help from the likes of the Dallas Cowboys, who are, imploding and beating themselves more than I think anybody else is beating them, and certainly helping, helping that cause along. So all of those things combined, we saw a path to it, but to say that we predicted it, I think would be going a little too far.
And I think right now, Jaden Daniels has been the one that really has this thing pushing the whole ship in the right direction, right? And I just want to say, from an Eagles fan perspective, you have not seen this much respect for an opposing Washington quarterback in a long time. And that might be the biggest fear for a lot of people, because we know that in this division, it's usually the quarterbacks that take it. Is Jaden Daniels, he's got to be not just an RG3 blip in a pan, right? Like, this guy is legit, and he has the frame and build and everything to withstand the injuries in the NFL. So I'm a little nervous for tomorrow just because of one guy, and I think a lot of Eagles fans are as well.
Yeah, I mean, a dynamic quarterback changes things, and there's a lot of franchises in the NFL that have a history with dynamic quarterbacks, but I don't know if there's a franchise other than the Eagles that has more of a history. I mean, going back, Randall Cunningham and all that stuff. Like this franchise knows, and so that means the Eagles fan base knows how much of an impact a dynamic quarterback can be. So when you see one wearing opposing colors, I think that's where some of that respect comes from. And, I will tell you, man, and I know we're on a short week, so maybe some of that is the short week as well. But I got a lot of trash talk in my YouTube comments from Cincinnati Bengals fans. I got a lot of trash talk from Bears fans. I got a lot of trash talk from Steelers fans. Obviously, Steelers fans feeling pretty good about that trash talk now. Haven't really gotten a lot of trash talk from Eagles fans so far. So I think that kind of echoes your sentiment of the respect that Jaden has kind of brought to the team. And, not only that, but you also look at the defensive side of the ball, I think, and when Bobby Wagner arrived, there were some obvious questions about physically where is he as a player, but pretty much everybody echoed the same sentiment that even if he's not physically there as a player that he, where he was before, his arrival and his decision to join this team specifically automatically legitimizes the team, and it legitimizes what they're doing in Washington. And then you see that, the defense isn't the best in the league, certainly, but they're doing enough, and they're certainly hunting the ball more recently. They're getting their sack numbers up recently. And Bobby Wagner is getting a lot of credit in the press, especially from Joe Witt Jr., the defensive coordinator, who just a couple of weeks ago was like, hey, man, the opposing offense moved so quickly that there were a handful of plays that Bobby just had to call on the fly on the field himself. We didn't have time to communicate. He's just saying, hey, here's what we're doing, and I know exactly what the call is, and that just kind of shows you the impact that a guy like Bobby, a veteran towards the end of his career, is making on one side, but then the rookie quarterback, like you mentioned, making on the other side.
And I think to your point as well, you look at Zach Ertz, and I remember having this discussion with Marcus back in the summer, and I think Lou and I said it as well, that a lot of those free agent signings, the Bobby Wagners, right? You bring in a Zach Ertz. For Philadelphia Eagles fans, it gave us like 2011 Dream Team vibes. But to
Mm-hmm.
see everything going right, you got to give a lot of credit to that front office. And I know Lou and I over
Yep.
at our show, we have loved the draft classes for Washington over the last couple of years. How influential has this free agent class been for this Washington team to get this ship right?
I mean, truth be told, man, the new guys are pretty much everything, right? I mean,
Mhm.
outside of, Sam Cosmi is a returning player. Obviously, Terry McLaurin is a returning player that's doing a lot of good stuff. Brian Robinson Jr. And Benjamin St. Juste is a starting cornerback. I know a lot of Commanders fans have some angst with him after that touchdown he gave up against Mike Williams. And then you, of course, have Deron Payne, who is obviously on the starting defensive line, and I think his impact is definitely more felt by the team and outside the stat box. But outside of that handful of guys, Quan Martin is also one of those that you need to shout out. Like outside of about a handful of guys, everybody else is new, whether they're a veteran free agent or whether they're a rookie draftee. And this draft class certainly has made a massive impact on the team, and looks like it's poised to make an impact moving forward. I mean, we haven't even seen Ben Sinnott or wide receiver Luke McCaffrey really scratch the surface of their potential and their ability given on this team, and that's something that we certainly hope to see moving forward. But yeah, man, I mean, it's interesting because with as much changeover as they had this season and as impactful as that changeover has really been this year, there stands to reason to be a good amount of changeover next year. There's like 32 or 33. I don't remember the exact count, but there's more than 30 expiring contracts on this roster right now.
So
So
these
the
guys are in.
potential for this, what's that?
These guys are in. Like they're ready. Like they know that this year
Yeah,
they have to go and get it because of
yeah,
how many guys are impending the end of their Washington careers potentially. So I mean,
yeah.
if
It's basically
one
a
team
tryout.
said they were going all in, Jerry might have said it, but Washington really has showed it so far. In all honesty.
Yeah, and they'll tell you too. And DQ has been asked, and he has admitted, like he'll admit that they're a little bit further ahead than he expected them even to
Mhm.
be at this point in time. And that's always a pleasant surprise. And what you get to do is you get to start picking through those 1 year deals and expiring contracts and say, okay, are you a reason we're ahead of schedule? And if you are, maybe we plan on offering you a little bit more money in the offseason. I think obviously, going back to Bobby, I think Bobby Wagner is the type of player like if he wants to come back on a 1 year deal next year, kind of play that 1 year to year type of situation. I think this team would love to have him back, and continue to mentor all the new players they bring in. But there's gonna be a lot of contract decisions they got to make, and then of course the players have to make their decisions on: are you willing to take what the Washington Commanders are going to want to offer you, or do you want to try to test your value on the market? Say, hey, look what I did for that Commanders team, and I imagine what I could do for your team, and all those things. And then again, Adam Peters is going to continue building this thing through the draft. So how the draft board looks and how the draft class looks and where he thinks he can go get talent is going to play a part into it too. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how this team looks 3 years from now versus right now, because as good as this team has been so far, it could look incredibly different. In 20, even as early as 2025, but certainly 2026.
Before we get into the Eagles portion of the show, let's take a step back and look at the present. I was going to say the future. We were just looking at the future, but the present right now. Who is not going to be playing in this game for the Washington Commanders? I know the new addition, Lattimore, he's not going to be in this
No.
game. Who else is not going to be able to see the field on Thursday?
Yeah, so linebacker Nick Bellore, who's a special teams ace. He was a special teams ace in Seattle. He's the guy that they brought him in there for that reason. He's been pretty solid on special teams. Injured last week. He was wearing a pretty gnarly brace on his leg, so he's not going to be available, I don't think, for some time. Certainly not this game. You already mentioned Marshawn Lattimore, and then kicker Austin Seibert. And as much as people might kind of like blow over the kicker, Austin Seibert was the fifth kicker this team had on his roster this season, because that's how much it struggled to find a solidified kicker after releasing the first one due to off the field problems. But they brought in Zane Gonzalez. Zane Gonzalez made all of his kicks last week, so you hope that can continue this week, but it's a different environment. That was a home game. It was daytime. The weather was fairly decent. Didn't start raining until after the game. This is Philly. This is prime time. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more ramped up. So we'll see how Zane does. Hopefully they're not relying on him to kick a lot of field goals, and they can worry about him making the extra points. But Right now, everybody else looks at least healthy enough to go. Most importantly, being Brian Robinson Jr. To help establish that power run game, because this is certainly a run first team. Even though the attention is all on Jaden Daniels, and without Brian Robinson, it's much harder to establish that run game for the Commanders' offense.
Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so you can feel confident knowing you can get hard and stay hard whenever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and the generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on products and subscription plan.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
Hey, well, welcome to the AFC North party, right? 10 weeks, Steelers don't have a divisional game. Ravens have already had 3 of them. They've gone 2-1. Crazy. And this one is the biggest one. This is essentially battle for first place in the AFC North as it stands right now. Pittsburgh coming in 7-2, Baltimore 7-3. And you have a lot on the line here. And we talk about this rivalry all the time. I know that over recent years, some people have said, it's lost some of that intensity, lost some of that rivalry shine. But, man, we've gotten a lot of quotes this week from both sides that maybe it's juicing up this rivalry once again here.
It certainly is. And you're right. I think part of it was like both teams had their successes. So like the Ravens were Super Bowl champions and they kind of like there was a mutual respect there, and the hatred of the Ray Lewis days and Ed Reed and Hines Ward, those kind of went to the wayside. They still don't like each other, but they don't hate each other nearly as much. But oh boy, did some stuff get said in the Steelers locker room on Wednesday. Patrick Queen saying on his being let go from Baltimore, he said, quote, "I wasn't wanted back. I didn't get the offer back. It was definitely kind of upsetting, being there for 4 years and the bond that you grow with your teammates." He said, "You put your body on the line every single time that you go out there, even when you can barely move your leg or whatever the injury may have been. So I definitely feel a certain type of way after the whole situation, but I'm over it now." Doesn't sound like he is, Kevin. Sounds like he has a lot to say there. Patrick Queen was a guy that, just last year he had some, thoughtful words about the Steelers-Ravens rivalry, and now he's on the other side of it. And Kevin, it seems interesting to me. You got him saying that, Deshaun Elliott going on Marlon Humphrey's podcast, calling the Dolphins soft, Arthur Marlette talking. There's a lot of interesting bars being thrown around right now.
Yeah, and I know that when Patrick Queen signed over with Pittsburgh in the offseason, a lot was made of it from Patrick Queen himself. I mean, again, his introductory press conference, he said he wanted to take on that villain role. And, with the Baltimore situation, I mean, he revealed, and I think he might have mentioned it before, but he definitely made it clear during his press conference on Wednesday that Baltimore did not offer him a deal to come back to the Ravens. And I think that it definitely hurt him because he's still talking about it, and actually went into more specifics and said that he didn't really get over it until late August, early September when the games ended up starting, and that he definitely did feel a certain type of way about it. Said that he hasn't talked to John Harbaugh or Eric DeCosta since signing with the Steelers. So, this is going to probably be about as juiced up as we see Patrick Queen all season, I'm sure, because of all of the feelings and the emotions. And I think that's what this rivalry needs, right? I think some of that juice is going to be good for it, and some good old trash talking, so some good old, talk on the field. That to me is going to be huge. And the Ravens, they didn't offer Patrick Queen a deal because they paid Roquan Smith and they brought him in. He was the guy essentially you had to choose. In Baltimore, I'm sure didn't feel comfortable paying 2 big money contracts to inside linebackers. So for Patrick Queen, he did a lot of good things in Baltimore, especially when playing next to Roquan. I think Roquan unlocked another level of him in Baltimore, and obviously he's gone on to Pittsburgh. I know it was a bit of a rough start for PQ to start off the year, Chris, but as we saw in that Commanders game, I think that was his best game of the year. So I'm expecting to see Patrick Queen all sorts of fired up. And then we haven't even gotten to Deshaun Elliott, but I want to talk to you about Queen, because how has he looked in Pittsburgh so far this season?
So he started off the season rough against the Falcons, missed 4 tackles in that game, and then he was kind of up and down for a little while. But then when he came out of the bye, he looked sharp as all get out in that Commanders game. He was flying all over the field. He was contesting the run at the right spots, and I think that was the thing, was he just had to figure out his run fits and when he could be aggressive, when he needed to hold back and find that pace. At least for this game last week, he found that, and that was the number 4 rushing offense in the NFL, one of the top, also like the number 3 scoring offense in the NFL at the time, in the Commanders that they faced. And he also showed like, hey, that sideline to sideline speed, they called it QB option, and the edge went in on the running back, and so Jaden Daniels tucked the ball, tried to hit the sideline. Patrick Queen went from the middle part of the formation to the sideline, limited what should have been a 10-yard gain to a 3-yard gain, and so he's showing that. He's also playing better in coverage. And I think he's kind of being the player the Steelers need. And I said all along, when they signed Patrick Queen, it was not for him to take over the defense. They still got Minkah Fitzpatrick. They still got TJ Watt. They still got Cam Hayward. Alex Highsmith's hurt right now, but they're loaded with guys that are game changers. They just need Patrick Queen to be a really good linebacker that pieces it all together. And I think he's starting to do that, Kevin.
Yeah. And that obviously, for the thing with PQ coming into the league, was he came in during the COVID year, didn't really have a ton of experience at LSU in terms of getting big reps in season after season. And so it was hard for him and that entire 2020 class to get a rhythm. Certainly struggled in coverage, struggled with some of his decisions, got benched against Kansas City during his rookie season. And, that's a big wake-up call. But I think we started to see that evolution in year 3. And then when Roquan came in, we started to see the big evolution from Patrick. So I think, to me, rivalry week with Patrick Queen versus Derrick Henry, I think everybody's going to be watching that first meeting in the middle between those two, seeing who wins. But a couple of years ago, Deshaun Elliott won a meeting in the middle between Derrick Henry and himself. Now, that was when Derrick was in Tennessee and Deshaun was in Baltimore, but that was a big forced fumble play, or I think he might have been down, but he jarred the ball loose. But Deshaun went on Marlon Humphrey's podcast, and Marlon was like, okay, well, Deshaun, what's it like being a little bit of a lack of loyalty guy now, full-blown traitor, kind of in a jesting but not so much way. And Deshaun Elliott was like, hold on a second, I'm not going to say traitor, because the Ravens actually had an opportunity, he said, to sign him back, but they decided to go and get Marcus Williams. Deshaun Elliott went on, has played for a bunch of different teams. Now Pittsburgh, his latest stop, but he goes to a Steelers team where he's not required to be the best safety on the team. Obviously, Minkah Fitzpatrick has that honor. He kind of found a career revitalization in Pittsburgh this season?
He certainly has. He's been huge for them against the run. He's been helping against the pass. He helps underneath, and like he can kind of be that strong safety the Steelers have needed, and kind of wanted Terrell Edmonds to be. They wanted Edmonds to be a little bit more physical, and Deshaun Elliott's being that. He's helping a lot against the run. He's been a great fit for what the Steelers have needed. And you look right now, a colleague of mine, Derek Bell, who does a lot of great Steelers analyst work, he pointed out, hey, Minkah Fitzpatrick doesn't have any interceptions this season, but you know what team is giving up the fewest amount of passing yards down the middle part of the field? It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've allowed the fewest receptions and the fewest receiving yards in the middle part of the field this season. And a lot of it is because teams are not throwing it to Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Deshaun Elliott is contributing to that by helping take away tight ends, running backs, helping against the run. They're figuring they're figuring some things out, and I think they're getting sharper with how they're disguising things too, because they've had a lot of injuries here and there that have kind of held guys back, and now guys are fully healthy. And I think one thing you're going to start to see is more disguises as far as where the coverages are leading, more disguises where the pass rush is coming from. They're flipping TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith a little bit now, though Alex Highsmith will be out for this game. Preston Smith will be in there. Nick Herbig should be back this week. This is a Steelers defense that those guys have fit very well into. And it's interesting how passionate they sound about this rivalry game coming the other side of it. And how like that kind of contrast with like Deontay Johnson, who seemed kind of not too enthused about it. Like about, he wasn't looking for a revenge game. He's just more like, hey, I'm just excited to see what happens this week.
Yeah, Deontay very complimentary during his media availability on Tuesday about the Steelers, saying it's going to be weird to be in the away locker room. He's never been in the away locker room, so this will be his first time actually doing that, and said, he still talks to guys over there and has good relationships. Obviously, during rivalry week, you're kind of like, hold on, put all that to the side for a week. But again, he's a new part on the other side of the rivalry. But Arthur Millette said that, look, you're not a Raven until you beat the Steelers, right? That's a big thing in Baltimore. And obviously the Steelers have had the Ravens number over the last handful of seasons. In the last 8 games, the Ravens are 1-7 against the Steelers. And look, some of that has to do with the fact that in a couple of these games, the Ravens have been resting their starters in week 18 as the 1 seed, or, last year in Acrisure, just drops galore for the Ravens wide receivers, and that contributed to Baltimore's loss. But, a win is a win, and a loss is a loss. And right now, Pittsburgh, I think the last win was the Duck Hodges overtime game, the Marlon Humphrey punch on Juju. Was that it?
That was the last time I think Lamar won.
Yes, okay.
But remember, there was the Kenny Pickett game where he got injured and Mitch Trubisky
yes.
And then Chris Boswell missed like 2 field goals. I think one got blocked by
that was when Roquan and PQ each had an interception, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So there we go. Lamar's last win was the Peanut Marlon Humphrey game, but the Ravens' last win. Okay, yeah. So still not a great record for the Ravens. And look, Lamar will be the first to tell you, and he did on Wednesday, that the Steelers defense has given him the most trouble. He doesn't necessarily know why. He said the rivalry atmosphere and a bunch, but credit where credit is due, even though as hard as it is being Ravens-Steelers rivalry week, that Pittsburgh defense has found a way to shut Lamar down and has certainly been Lamar's kryptonite over the years.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
Bills, Chiefs, round 8 of Mahomes versus Allen.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover.
I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Chris Clark and Ryan Tracy of Locked On Chiefs, getting you ready for Week 11 Bills, Chiefs, the 9-0 Kansas City Chiefs coming to Buffalo to face the 8-2 Buffalo Bills. Gentlemen, if the Kansas City Chiefs are going to snap the Bills' 3-game regular season win streak against the Kansas City Chiefs, which has not mattered an ounce in the playoffs, what's got to go right for Kansas City in this one?
For me, it's they have to continue to take care of the ball. Patrick Mahomes has been a lot better the past couple of weeks taking care of the ball. If he doesn't turn the ball over, it helps their chances. And, you mentioned this earlier, and this is one of the big things in this game. The Chiefs lead the league or are very high in the league at 10-plus play drives. That wears a defense down. That wears a team down. And if they can continue to take care of the ball and have those type of sustained drives, Kansas City should be able to put themselves in the driver's seat to win this game.
I think that's a good talking point. The Bills very good at taking away the football. 18% of drives against the Bills defense end in a takeaway. The Bills have had multiple takeaways in all but 3 games this year. They've had a takeaway in every game. They've had a takeaway in 12 straight dating back to last season. So obviously I think that's going to be a big part of the equation here. And it's part of mine as well. I have 3 things written down for the Bills to have success and win this game. And taking care of the football matters quite a bit. And I think when you go back to the last 3 meetings between these 2 teams, the 3 meetings since 13 seconds where, obviously the fireworks happened at the end of that game, these hadn't been high-scoring affairs, guys. The highest point total scored by any team over the last 3 has been 27. These have typically been low 20s games, 20-17, 20-23, 24-20 type games. And so you got to make sure that every drive ends in a kick, either a punt, a field goal, or an extra point. You can't be giving away possessions. They matter so much in these types of games. And so, yeah, I think for the Bills, I'll match you. I'll say of equal importance for them to take care of the football. They've done well with that. The Bills have only given the ball away 6 times this year. And I guess 4 of those have come in the last 3 games. So that's picked up a little bit on, honestly, some goofy interceptions. So that taking care of the football, big one for both sides here.
Goofy's a great way to put it. So I know how I would go in and attack this particular team, but if we're doing the post-game show, Joe, and we're dealing with the Chiefs did break that snap, How would you break it down? What did they do to beat the Bills this time that maybe they haven't done in the past?
What did Kansas City do to beat the Bills? I mean, Kansas City, I don't, that's the thing about Kansas City. They're not game script dependent. They can win games all kinds of different ways, whatever it takes, right? They did great study and figured out how to block a kick at the end of the game to win. They need Patrick Mahomes to go have a game-winning drive. He's done that 4 times this year. They need to stop on defense. They can get it. So I think that's the beauty of a team like Kansas City, and I think other top teams like I would say Buffalo as well. They're not game script dependent. It doesn't have to go a certain way. You look at a team like Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's a good football team, but it has to go a certain way for them to win. There's a script. They're game script dependent. I don't think either of these teams are game script dependent. I think that they can find ways to win games no matter what. And I think obviously the Chiefs are the greatest example of that in the NFL, not only this year, but really since 2018.
You know, when I look at this game, you talk about how these have been low scoring games. Kansas City, I think, has something like over 20 games where they haven't allowed more than 24 points, I think, or 27 points. So I do think that continues in this game. So to me, it's, can you get Allen into third down situations where you can actually rush the passer? I'm not talking third and shorts. I'm talking, keep him in, third 5, third 6, and beyond that. Because if you can actually get after the quarterback and force him to get into those third down scenarios, it takes away the legs a little bit. I understand it's not going to take him away completely, but at least it takes it away a little bit easier than, a 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3 where he doesn't have to do much with his legs to go get that first down.
Yeah, I think Josh Allen's legs are going to matter in this one. He's choosy these days with when he's going to run. And he said on the McAfee show last week ahead of the Colts game that his body was feeling pretty good. And you saw him, he took off a little bit against the Colts. I think this is a game where you will see Josh weaponize his legs, especially if the Bills are going to be shorthanded with their skill players. No Keon Coleman, who has been the team's leading receiver this year. No Dalton Kincaid, potentially, right? He had a knee injury against the Colts and he didn't practice on Wednesday, which was a walkthrough. I don't know how that's going to go. And then Amari Cooper, who's got a wrist deal, even if he plays, it's going to have some type of brace on his hand. He caught passes out of the jugs machine on Wednesday, which is an encouraging sign. But, if they're going to be shorthanded with missing more than one of those guys, I think you see Josh Allen weaponize his legs a decent amount in this football game, of course, with the eyes of the nation watching.
I think that's one of my keys for the Chiefs to be victorious is they got to corral not just him, but James Cook as well. And for me, I would even go to the point, given the weapons that aren't there, is prioritizing the run first and really selling out, especially early in the ball game, to make sure that those two cannot hurt you. I'm talking overload blitzes. I'm talking all kinds of disguise. Spags going into the bag of tricks to try to make sure you can't get momentum. I think that's what kills the Chiefs against the Bills is when you let Josh in particular get momentum. Is there something else I'm missing? What's the hidden magic that we got to be on the lookout for?
I mean, the Bills have become a pretty balanced offense. They run the ball very successfully. Their zone rushing offense has really taken off lately, and that's allowed them to kind of work in some of the efficiency to the passing game. I think an X factor for me is going to be the down the field passing for Buffalo is, what type of appetite do they have for it, and is it successful? And it's trended well over the last 5 games after a really bad start. And so what type of opportunities are there down the field to maybe create some explosives? And then, defensively, like to me, all this talk about Mahomes, Allen, to me, how is the Bills defensive line going to show up? That's what it's going to come down to. Can they be disruptive enough? Can they win organically to create pressure and affect Patrick Mahomes? That's what it comes down to. I think that's the biggest storyline for me. So my 3 keys for the Bills: effective cage rush on Patrick Mahomes, take care of the football, and win in the red zone. This is one of those games where you get chances to score touchdowns. You got to score touchdowns. You get chances to hold them to field goals. You better hold them to field goals. I think the team that wins in the red zone, that takes care of the football and has the most disruption with their defensive line, wins this football game.
Can't argue there. I think the defensive line disruption is going to be huge in this game, and Kansas City has struggled to get after the passer the past couple of weeks. Possibly with the Bills missing the right tackle, that could help Kansas City a little bit, but I do think that Chris Jones and Tershawn Morton have to be absolutely disruptive, and George Karlaftis needs to be helping as well. So I do think if they can get pressure on Josh Allen, that's going to help, because you do not want to be blitzing Josh Allen, much like you guys don't want to be blitzing Patrick Mahomes to try to get pressure. that does not work out well for the defense usually.